The first thing Sua did was smile. Not a warm smile. Not a friendly one. The kind that warned you exactly who you were dealing with. She lifted her wine glass, looked directly at Dr. Anika Wallace, and said, "It's so sweet that my brother invited you. He's always had a soft spot for people who need guidance." Anika heard it. Every syllable. She picked up her own glass, took a slow sip, and set it back down without a word. The dinner table was full, Shin Tae-jun at the head, his wife Hwa-young beside him, Sua across from Anika, and the empty chair where Hajun had been sitting before his phone pulled him outside 10 minutes ago. The help moved quietly in the background. Candles. Good food. The kind of house that swallowed noise. Anika reached for the bread. Sua watched her do it. Then she reached across for the water pitcher, more reach than she needed, and her elbow caught her wine glass. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth in a slow, deliberate bloom, crawling toward Anika's side of the table. Sua pulled back, pressed her hand to her mouth. "Oh no. I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy sometimes." She didn't sound sorry. She sounded pleased. "You know what's funny though," she continued, tilting her head. "I heard that in some cultures, a spill at the table means the guest wasn't really welcome to begin with." Interesting, isn't it? Anika put her fork down. Slowly. She looked at Sua the way you look at something you've already decided you're not afraid of. "Say what you actually mean," she said quietly. "Or don't say anything at all." Sua's eyes sharpened. "Aren't you going to clean that?" Anika looked at the wine, then back at her. "Excuse me. If you spilled it," Anika said calmly, "you clean it." For the first time that evening, Sua's smile slipped. Anika folded her hands in front of her. "I don't know what impression you've formed of me," she continued, her voice even, "but whatever game you're trying to play, I'm not the woman it's going to work on." That was when Hwa-young appeared. She had been coming from the kitchen, catching only the last thread of it, the tone, the posture, the way her daughter was sitting. She read the room in 2 seconds. She walked to the table, and, before anyone could move or speak, her hand connected with the side of Sua's face. The sound cut through the entire room. "Shin Sua." Her voice was low and devastating. "Is this how I raised you?" Sua's hand flew to her cheek. Her eyes went wide. The door from the corridor opened and Hajun walked back in, phone still in hand. His mother's expression. His sister's cheek. The wine on the tablecloth. Anika sat perfectly still with her hands folded in her lap. He looked at Anika. "What happened?" And, just like that, everything in that room shifted. But what Sua didn't realize was that this dinner had already become the biggest mistake she would make all year. Subscribe and stay with me, because this story is only getting started. It started 4 months earlier, on a Tuesday night, when Shin Tae-jun was rushed through the doors of Kang Medical Center with his family barely keeping pace behind him. Anika was the attending physician on call. She saw them come in, a man in his early 60s, color drained, breathing labored, his wife gripping his hand so hard her knuckles had gone white. Behind them, a tall man in a dark coat moving with the kind of controlled urgency that told her he was used to being the one in charge of every room he walked into. Tonight he wasn't. She spent the next 4 hours with Tae-jun. She didn't leave his side until she knew exactly what they were dealing with and what the path forward looked like. She spoke to the family with honesty and without the clinical coldness that some of her colleagues used as armor. She answered every question. She came back to check on him the next morning and the morning after that. On the 4th day, Tae-jun was sitting up in his bed looking considerably more like himself. He watched her review his chart. When she asked how he was feeling, he studied her face before he answered. "Better," he said. "You remind me of someone." She looked up. "Who?" He smiled toward the corner of the room where his wife Saturday, her. "When she was your age." Hwa-young looked at her husband and shook her head slowly, but she was smiling. The day he was discharged, the family gathered in the corridor outside his room. Hwa-young embraced Anika's hands warmly. Tae-jun thanked her with a sincerity that had nothing performative about it. Hajun was the last. He stood in front of her, looked at her directly, and said, "Thank you. For how you cared for him. Not just medically." "It's what I do," she said. "No," he said. "It's who you are." He held her gaze 1 second longer than necessary. Then they left. Anika Wallace lived alone in a clean, quiet apartment 20 minutes from the hospital. She had built everything she had from nothing, Every position earned, every exam passed, years of ordinary life sacrificed for this career she was genuinely proud of. She didn't regret any of it. But some nights, when the apartment was too quiet and she had nobody to call, she sat with that weight in a way she never talked about. At work, she was respected by most and targeted by one. Dr. Cho Hyun-sik, her direct superior, had made his interest known early. She had made her position equally clear. He hadn't taken it well. Since then her schedule became tighter, her cases got the least favorable distribution, and the small professional courtesies that made long shifts manageable had quietly disappeared. She handled it the way she handled most things alone, without complaint, absorbing the friction and converting it into fuel. 3 weeks after Taejun's discharge, her car broke down on Yongdo Boulevard at 4:30 in the afternoon. She was stranded on the side of the road, phone in hand, when a black car slowed beside her. She didn't look up immediately. Then it stopped. 2 doors opened. She looked up. Hajun stood on the pavement 10 meters away, his driver behind him. He took in the scene, her, the car, the open hood, and walked toward her with his hands in his pockets like he had all the time in the world. "Dr. Wallace," he said. "Mr. Shin," she said. They looked at each other for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved, barely, and he said, "Do you need help?" "I was managing," she said. "I can see that," he said, and looked at the engine. His driver sorted the car within 20 minutes. Hajun stood beside her while it happened, not hovering, just present. When the engine turned over, she exhaled. "Thank you," she said. Again. "You keep giving me reasons," he said. Then, without making a performance of it, "Would you ever get coffee with me?" She looked at him. "Coffee. Just coffee," he said. She considered him, the stillness of him, the way he asked without pressure, like her answer either way was something he'd respect completely. "Give me your number," she said. That evening she got home, dropped her bag by the door, and sat on her couch with her phone in her hand. She was about to call him to say thank you when his name lit up her screen first. She stared at it for a second, then answered. "Did you get back safely?" he asked. "I did," she said. "I was actually about to call you. To say thank you." "You already said it." "Properly," she said. "Coffee," he said. "When?" She looked at her ceiling. "Saturday." "Saturday," he repeated. "Good night, Dr. Wallace." "Good night, Mr. Shin." She put the phone down and sat quietly for a moment. Shin Hajun was not a man people misread twice. He ran the Shin Group's less visible operations with the kind of precision and coldness that had built a reputation long before he turned 30. He had power, influence, and a face that gave away nothing when he didn't want it to. He had been in rooms where the wrong word could end a man's livelihood and had said the right word every single time. He was not impulsive, careless, or the kind of man who followed instincts he hadn't examined first. And yet here he was, driving past a broken-down car on a Tuesday afternoon and telling his driver to stop. He didn't examine that one too long. That same night, he came home to find Suwa in the living room with Jia. They greeted him. He responded, asked Suwa where their parents were, heard the answer, and walked down the hallway toward his study. Behind him, Jia watched him go. Suwa caught her friend's expression and smiled to herself, slow and satisfied. She had a plan taking shape, and it only needed a little time. Saturday came. They sat across from each other in a small, decent coffee shop that was his suggestion and her approval. Not flashy, just comfortable. "How long have you been a doctor?" he asked. "Since I was 26, she said. 8 years. You chose it young." "I always knew," she said. "There was never really another option in my head." He nodded, turning his cup slowly. "My father talked about you after he came home," he said. "More than once." She looked up. "Really?" "He said you made him feel like a person," he said. "Not a patient." "He said that matters more than people think." She was quiet for a moment. "It does," she said. "I learned that early. The medicine keeps them alive. But how you treat them, that decides whether they want to stay." Hajun looked at her for a moment longer than the conversation required. Then he said something that surprised her, something dry and perfectly timed, and she laughed before she could stop herself. It came out fully, unguarded, and she pressed her hand to her mouth after, almost embarrassed by it. He looked quietly pleased. "You're funny," she said, like she hadn't expected it. "Don't tell anyone," he said. 2 weeks later, they went on a proper date. A restaurant, Not extravagant but excellent, the kind of place where the food was the point. They talked easily by then. The conversation had started finding its own rhythm. At some point she mentioned Hyunsik without intending to make it a big thing. Just a detail from her week. The way he'd rerouted a case she'd been working on for no legitimate reason, how she'd had to absorb it and keep moving. Hajun listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he asked one question. How long has this been happening? Since I told him no, she said simply. About 8 months. He nodded. Set his fork down. Said nothing else about it. She watched his face and knew better than to think that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. 48 hours later, Dr. Cho Hyun-sik was removed from his position. Internal review, they said. Administrative restructuring. The official language was clean and gave nothing away. Anika stood in the break room when she heard her coffee cup halfway to her mouth. She put it down. She thought about the way Hajun's jaw had tightened when she mentioned 8 months. She thought about the 48 hours between that dinner and this moment. She did the math without trying. She picked up her phone and called him. Hajun, she said when he picked up. Anika, he said, and his voice was perfectly even. I know it was you, she said. Are you angry? He asked. She thought about it genuinely. No, she said. I'm not angry. Another pause. Thank you. He shouldn't have been there, he said simply. No, she agreed. He shouldn't have. After that, he started appearing at the hospital. Always with an excuse. A question about his father's medication. A form that apparently needed clarification. Once, improbably, he said he was in the area. She was in the area. At the hospital where she worked. She didn't call him on it. She'd look up from a chart, and he'd be there in the corridor, and something in the day would rearrange itself around that. They'd talk for 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes less. He never stayed long enough to be inconvenient. He always left before she had to ask him to. She looked forward to it in a way she hadn't planned. One afternoon, Taejun called Hajun into his study. He was sitting in his chair by the window, looking well, looking like himself again, and he let his son sit before he said anything. That doctor, he said. The one who treated me. Hajun kept his expression neutral. What about her? Do you still see her? Yes. Taejun nodded slowly, like he'd suspected as much. I saw how you looked at her, he said. That day at the hospital. When we were leaving. He leaned back. I don't need to tell you everything, Hajun. Your mother and I are not getting any younger. Hajun said, Father. That's all I'm saying, Taejun said, and picked up his newspaper. Down the hall, pressed close to the wall near the study door, Sua had heard enough. She processed it quickly, and she didn't like any of it. The doctor. Her brother. Her father's approval already forming before anything had even been announced. She thought about what it would mean, a stranger folding herself into this family, this name, everything they had built. She told herself it was concern. She told herself she was protecting her brother. But underneath that, simpler and uglier, was the fact that she had already decided who belonged beside Hajun, and it was Jia, her closest friend, who had loved him quietly for years. She began to engineer it. Every time Jia was in the house, she made sure the timing placed her near Hajun. She found reasons for them to be in the same room. She made comments. Set small stages. Hajun walked through all of it without seeing it at all. Jia was like a little sister to him, she always had been. He was warm and brief with her, the way he was with anyone he had no particular feelings for, and then he moved on with his day. Sua watched this happen twice, then 3 times, and her frustration curdled into something sharper. If her brother couldn't see what was right in front of him, then the problem was what was distracting him. She decided to remove the distraction. She found Anika on a Thursday afternoon outside the hospital, heading to her car. Jia was beside her. Sua stopped in front of Anika like she'd been waiting, which she had. I'll make this simple, Sua said. My brother's world is not something you just walk into. Anika looked at her. She didn't step back. I don't remember asking for your permission. You should, Sua said. You don't know who you're dealing with. Women like you. Choose your next words very carefully, Anika said. Quiet. Absolute. Jia stepped forward. We're just saying that Hajun has a world that requires a certain kind of woman. Someone who understands his life, his family, what he needs. Someone who's been here. She glanced at Sua. Not someone who met him in a hospital and saw an opportunity. The difference between us, Anika continued quietly, is that I earned everything I have. That's why I don't need your approval. Anika looked at Jia for a long moment. Then she looked back at Sua. I'm going to say this once, she said. Stay out of my way. Don't come to my workplace again. Don't send your friend to do your talking. And don't ever mistake my patience for weakness. She picked up her bag. We're done here. She walked to her car and didn't look back. She didn't tell Hajun. 2 weeks later, Wayang found her son in the living room doing something she hadn't seen him do in a long time. He was smiling. Not at her, not at anything in the room. At his phone. She stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment, this man who had carried so much for so long, and she felt something settle in her chest. Hajun, she said. He looked up and whatever the expression was, he put it away. Mother. Bring her to dinner, she said. He stared at her. Who? She gave him a look that said she had not raised a foolish child and did not intend to treat him like one now. You've been smiling into that phone for weeks, she said. I know what that means. Bring her. He opened his mouth. Hajun, she said simply. He closed it. Then the corner of his mouth moved. Yes, mother, he said. Anika came on a Friday evening. She wore something simple and right. She had thought about it longer than she would admit. Taejun met her at the door himself, which she hadn't expected, and he took her hand and said, You look well. The hospital agrees with you. Wayang embraced her warmly, the kind of embrace that doesn't need a reason. Hajun was beside her when she came in. He put his hand briefly at her back, bent slightly, and said quietly near her ear, You're okay. I'm good, she said. Good, he said. Sua sat at the table and looked at nothing in particular. The dinner started well. The food was excellent, the conversation moved between easy and meaningful, and Taejun told a story from 30 years ago that made the whole table laugh, including, reluctantly, Anika. Hajun watched her laugh and looked away before she could catch him doing it. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, apologized, and pushed back his chair. 10 minutes, he said to the table. He touched Anika's shoulder once as he passed and stepped out toward the corridor. 10 minutes was all it took. The silence after he left had a different quality. Anika reached for the bread. Sua watched her do it. It's so sweet that my brother invited you, she said, lifting her wine glass. He's always had a soft spot for people who need guidance. Anika set the bread down. She heard it. Every word of it. She picked up her own glass, took a slow sip, and said nothing. Sua waited. Then she reached across for the water pitcher, more reach than she needed, and her elbow caught her wine glass. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth in a slow, deliberate bloom. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy. She tilted her head. You know, in some cultures, they say a spill at dinner means the guest was never really welcome to begin with. Anika put her fork down. She looked at Sua the way you look at something you have already decided is beneath your fear. Say what you actually mean, she said quietly. Or don't say anything at all. Sua's eyes went cold. Aren't you going to clean that? Wayang came through the kitchen doorway. She had caught the tail end of it, the tone, the posture, her daughter's expression. She read it in under 2 seconds. She walked to the table, and before anyone could speak, her open hand connected with Sua's cheek. The sound was sharp and absolute. Shin Sua. Her voice could have cut glass. Is this how I raised you? Sua's hand flew to her face. Her eyes went wide and wet. The corridor door opened and Hajun walked back in, phone in hand, and stopped. He took in his mother's posture. Sua's cheek. The wine. Anika, perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. He crossed to the table. He looked at Anika. What happened? Your mother has handled it, she said. Anika. His voice was low. Hajun. Tell me. She held his gaze. Then she exhaled. The first comment I let go. Then the wine. She paused. Then she said things that made it clear I wasn't welcome. Another pause, smaller. And that wasn't the first time. She came to the hospital 2 weeks ago. With her friend. They told me I was here for your money and your name and that I should step back. Hajun went completely still. The kind of still that wasn't calm. Wayang came back into the room first, her face composed. Sua followed, eyes down. She walked to Anika, stopped, and said quickly and quietly, I'm sorry. Then she turned and left before anyone could respond. Anika watched her go. Then she reached for her bag. I think I should go. Young moved to her immediately. She took both of Anika's hands in hers and held them. What happened tonight is not this family, she said. It is not who we are, and it is not how you will be treated. I am so sorry. She said it without performance, without management. Just a woman meaning every word. Across the table, Taejun looked at his son. Keep her, he said. 2 words. Quiet. Final. Hajun was already on his feet. He walked Anika out. His mother followed to the door, embraced her, and said goodbye with both hands on her face, like she was someone already counted. Anika felt something crack very slightly in her chest and kept her expression steady. In the car, the city moved past them in silence for a while. When he pulled up outside her building, he cut the engine and turned to her. I'm sorry, he said. Don't, she said. Anika. She's an adult, she said. What she did belongs to her. Not to you. She looked at him. Don't apologize for someone else's choices. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. She got out. He waited until her building door closed before he drove. He found Sua in the living room when he got home. She looked up when he walked in and read his face and looked away. Look at me, he said. She did. You went to her workplace, he said. You sat at a dinner table in this house and you humiliated someone I care about. Someone who sat in this family's hospital room for 4 days and didn't leave until she was sure our father was going to be okay. He let that sit for a moment. You did all of that. Hajun, I was just... Don't, he said. Don't tell me you were protecting me. From what? From a woman who has built her own career, her own life, with her own hands? You sit in this house and spend this family's money and you have the nerve to call her an opportunist. Sua's joy tightened. I just thought Jia likes you. She's liked you for a long time. I thought if you could just see. So that was it, he said. He looked at her with something worse than anger. Disappointment. You put Jia up to come to her hospital. You engineered all of it. Because of that, she's right for you. That's not your decision, he said. Jia is like a sister to me. She has always been like a sister to me. And if she carries feelings beyond that, I'm sorry for it, but that is not Anika's fault. He stepped back. I don't want to hear this again. Not Jia's name in that context. Not another word against Anika. Not in this house, not anywhere. He looked at her for one more second. I'm disappointed in you, Sua. I genuinely am. He walked out. 6 weeks later, he invited her to the Shin Group's annual formal event. She wore black, something architectural and clean that required nothing extra. He met her at the entrance and looked at her the way a man looks at something he can't quite believe is real. You look, he started. Don't make it strange, she said. Exceptional, he finished. She let herself smile. He moved through the room with her beside him, easy and natural, introducing her to people without ceremony or over-explanation. Just, this is Anika. Like she had always been there. Midway through the evening, Sua found her alone near the far end of the room. She came without Jia. She stood in front of Anika and was quiet for a moment, like she was arranging something inside herself. I want to apologize, she said. Properly. Not the way I did at dinner. She paused. What I did was wrong. I told myself I was protecting my brother. But I was being selfish and I was wrong. Anika looked at her steadily. I accept your apology, she said. But I want to be honest with you. That doesn't make us close. We're not friends. Maybe in time something changes. But right now, that's where we are. Sua nodded. That's fair, she said quietly. She walked away. Anika watched her go and then turned back to the room. Across the space, Hajun was watching her. He crossed to her slowly, moving through the crowd like it parted for him because it always did. He stopped in front of her. He looked at her face, the steadiness of it, the quiet strength that she wore like a second skin, and he felt something in him that he had spent his whole life keeping in very controlled, very organized compartments begin to loosen completely. He reached into his jacket. And then he was on one knee in front of her. The noise in the room fell away in sections, conversations dropping off, heads turning, glasses pausing halfway. Anika looked down at him, and her composure broke. What are you doing? She breathed. Please get up. Anika Wallace, he said. His voice was low and clear and carried further than it should have. I have spent 38 years being certain about everything. Every decision. Every move. And then I watched you work in a hospital corridor at midnight, and I haven't been certain about anything since. He looked up at her. I don't want to be certain. Not if it means not choosing you. The room was completely silent. Marry me, he said. She looked at him for a moment that stretched long and full and quiet. This man on his knee in a room full of people. This man who controlled everything and was choosing right now to be completely undone. Get up first, she said. After you answer, he said. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. Yes, she said. Yes. He stood. He slid the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her, not briefly, not for show, not the careful, controlled version of himself that this room was accustomed to. Like she was the only thing in the room because to him, right now, she was. The applause started slowly and then filled everything. Wayung found her first, pulling her into an embrace that was full and warm and said everything her words didn't need to. Welcome, she said, against Anika's cheek. Just that word. But the way she said it made it mean, you were always going to be here. We just had to wait for you to arrive. Taejun came next. He took her face in both his hands, the way a father does, and kissed her forehead. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Sua found her last. She stood in front of her, and for once there was nothing calculated in her expression. Congratulations, she said. Quiet. True. Anika looked at her and nodded. Thank you. Later, they drove out into the city together. The event behind them, the room and the applause and the weight of the evening receding. She had her hand in his across the console. The city lights moved past the windows in long, slow streaks. She thought about a Tuesday night 4 months ago, a man rushed through emergency doors, a family falling apart at the seams, and herself moving into the chaos with nothing but her hands and her training and her belief that every person in that room deserved someone who would not leave. She had not left. And just like that, everything that had started with one emergency room visit had changed both of their lives forever. If you enjoyed this story, tell me, if you were Anika, would you have accepted Sua's apology, or would you have kept your distance? And if you've never seen stories like this before, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.